The Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 educators in Tennessee through our online video library. These videos are aligned with standards set by the Tennessee Department of Education. For more professional development videos, check out our website at cem.mtsu.edu. Well, we're ready to get started on our sessions, our afternoon sessions. I am happy to introduce today Miss Jenna Winstead. She is coming to us here formerly with Clarksville Montgomery County Schools, and again, this is a topic that's been requested. Jenna was nominated by y'all. This topic has been requested to be presented in the collaboratives, and so this is on collaboration and co-teaching for special populations. So Jenna, we're so happy you're here today, and take the floor.
Thank you, guys.
Continue your introduction.
I appreciate it. So yes, it says former teacher. So I had, if we call it a quarter life crisis, maybe it's a midlife crisis, 3/4 crisis, I'm 40, and left the classroom in March. It was exactly the break that I needed in order to make me realize that I am passionate about education. So I am here as a former teacher. Hopefully I will be back in the classroom in August, and I'm very excited to be here to help you guys kind of learn how I have done things in Clarksville, Montgomery County in my classrooms. So quickly by a show of hands, how many of you guys are elementary? Okay, middle, high, and any administrators in the room? A couple, okay. Anyone who is classified? So everyone else is certified, either SLP, OT, PT, all the things. Okay, awesome. So I will tell you guys a little bit about me, my beautiful family. I was born in Nashville. I like to include that I was identified as gifted because I was also a member of the niche of special education students in Metro Nashville Public Schools. I am a graduate of MLK Magnets. It's a big deal, for me at least. I was born and raised in Nashville. I got married to my husband, Scott. I am a mom, I am a wife, I am a daughter, and most of all, I like to make life easier. So, my route to becoming a teacher is a little different. At the age of 18, I had a full scholarship to college. Great thing, right? High school teachers, you should be excited when your students get those full scholarships. Woohoo! Gave it up because my boyfriend was in Nashville. So I gave up my full scholarship. Didn't know what I wanted to do. Became a pharmacy tech for about 10 years. I also bartended and worked in restaurant management for a while, and decided I wanted a college education. I realized very quickly if I wanted to get more of a gray collar job, not really blue collar, not white collar, somewhere in between, your doors were closed unless you had a college degree. So back to college. Graduating from MLK for the Health Sciences and Engineering High School, I wanted to be a doctor. So my degree is actually in chemistry. Then I got my minor and certification to teach high school chemistry. So I have 6 years of teaching high school chemistry, physical science, and geology. That one was a blast. I had the valedictorian and then 2 CDC students in my classroom. And it was really amazing and challenging. And it was amazing. I loved it. Then I did 1 year in middle school. Clarksville Montgomery County has residency programs. I'm not sure. I think Nashville has them as well. So they actually paid for my master's degree so that I could get my administrative license, and I worked for 1 year with our administrative team in a middle school. I then realized after that maybe gen ed was not for me. I had always taught inclusion classrooms and loved it, being able to meet students where they were. For instance, anyone chemistry? Any chemistry teachers? Okay, this is going to be really fun. So we were teaching stoichiometry, which is dimensional analysis. So converting like teaspoons to tablespoons, for those of you who may not be as familiar, converting fractions into decimals, dimensional analysis. I had students in my inclusion high school classroom that their IEP goals were to do simple multiplication without the use of a calculator. And I was expected to have them convert from grams to moles to grams in a balanced equation. I realized very quickly, chemistry was not teaching content, it was teaching problem solving. Using that moral compass that I had, I decided to go get my special education endorsement. So I did that for 3 years. Also taught in elementary school for the last 1 3/4 in special education, which made me very, very empathetic to the extra work that special education teachers did. An inclusion classroom, you help with their IEP goals. Special ed teachers, we have a job and a half, right? We teach all day with these students, and then we have to go home and analyze the data. We have to go home, write their IEPs, contact the parents, and document it in 4 places in TN Pulse that we actually called the parents and what they said and did, right? So I feel like I have a really great background of being in the general education classroom, being in the special education classroom, working as a baby admin is what I called myself when I was in my leadership position, to really understand what different voices are really going through. So I will tell you guys, it's after lunch, we're all sleepy. I did this last summer. I was very excited to be invited back as a speaker. We're all tired, just like that class that you get after lunch. So you are gonna have to participate. You're not gonna be doing jumping jacks. You are just gonna have to be talking to people. I'm not gonna make you like, okay, find someone you don't know and talk to them about things, but I just do want you guys to know, I'm not an admin. I'm not a college professor. I am just like you guys, and I am not claiming to be the expert. I'm just claiming to feel confident in communicating what has worked for me, okay? So I also want to hear what has worked for you, because just like in our classrooms, what makes sense to one student, using that same example or analogy isn't gonna work for somebody else. So that is the participation that I would like to get from you guys today. So task number 1, I want you guys to think about what you wanna take away from this session. So you guys all came here on summer. You started thinking about what you needed to do. As great teachers, we are reflective practitioners. So with co-teaching and collaboration, think about some things that you want to take away. Because if I don't address it during my presentation, I want to make sure during Q&A that we are definitely able to take that. So think about your experience co-teaching. 3 glows and 3 grows. So what are 3 things that went really, really well with your co-teaching experience? That may be easy for some. For some, you may think of 0.5, okay? And that's why you're here. And then also 3 grows, so something that you want to kind of focus on and get better in. Who has a grow they want to share? Something that it is that elephant in the room. It is the rock in their shoe, that co-teaching just has not worked for them. And you don't know why, or you do know why.
So some years ago, when I was in a co-teaching situation, I think a growth for me was that I was placed in a classroom in which I did not have the content knowledge. So for example, had you placed me in your chemistry class, I would have easily said, okay, let me pass your papers out. Or I'm going to make sure that they're on the right page. So that was a growth for me. And I will give a specific example. I was coming from a self-contained CDC classroom, and I had the opportunity to work inclusion, and it was 12th grade British Lit. So that was huge for me. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you sharing out. Anyone else have a similar experience? Yeah. We'll wait for Dr. Clark to get a microphone.
So the main, in my evaluations year, I co-taught 7th grade ELA and math. And the one thing that they, like in every evaluation I had was, you need to be delivering more core content. I'm not a content teacher. So I don't understand how I can be responsible for providing content I'm not licensed to teach.
Absolutely. I appreciate you sharing that. So if you are not brave enough to share, or maybe your brain is like, I'm still digesting my food, Jenna, I can't really think on the ball, I appreciate you guys sharing out, because that was my experience. And last year, I was really, really lucky. I had a co-teacher. His bachelor's degree was in history, and I taught what? Chemistry. And he was my co-teacher, and he didn't know what to do. We didn't have behavior students in our classroom. If we did, they weren't a behavior in our classroom. So how was he supposed to be of the greatest asset to help these students to match and meet their goals of simple multiplication without a calculator, or being able to understand the instructions on that paper, right? So we have probably all heard about these 6 models of co-teaching. How many of you guys get these at the beginning of the year from your principals? And they say, can you choose one of these? And this is how you're going to co-teach. And this sounds great, right? But is this what works? Can we all fit, if we can't fit our students into a box, can we fit ourselves into a box that this is going to work every day for every student, okay? Especially if you're not a content expert. My very first year teaching in Clarksville, Montgomery County schools, I had inclusion physical science. My co-teacher was an educational assistant, classified staff who came from elementary. Ms. Cook was an amazing asset, but she was not confident in her skills. So when she had to help our students, that confidence just, it is contagious, right? And so if she wasn't confident in teaching the students, and then they weren't becoming confident either. So it's not a one size fits all. It is the dependent variable in that inclusive classroom. If you have multiple inclusion settings, or maybe if you're in elementary where you've got one inclusion classroom and you don't have another classroom, if you're in the upper elementary where they're changing classes, are you writing 2 lesson plans, or are you expected to teach that same standard to that same academic level of rigor, but you have students, but you have a co-teacher? So why aren't your students showing that they understand this, right? So you really have to adapt and adjust. I will tell you my story. I was a co-teacher last year in the elementary school where I worked. And one of the classrooms that I went into for 30 minutes, because that's all the amount of time that students need help in math, and a 60-minute session is 30 minutes. So I went in for 30 minutes to help a group of students, and the teacher had control of that classroom. She was a true content expert. She was Teacher of the Year for the 2nd time. And when I went into that classroom, I was not the content expert. With my chemistry background, I knew math. I knew 5th grade math, right? Like, I could do that. But what did she need from me? And again, as a content expert, as a lead teacher, as a Teacher of the Year, she didn't need to train me if I'm expected to be a content expert. So my job became reading the room, okay? When I saw students with the look, we all know the look, right? The look of like, did I pack my lunch today? Or what's a decimal again? I would raise my hand and ask the question that I knew they probably had, right? Miss Hodges, why did you multiply the top number and not the bottom number when you were multiplying that fraction? Because I'm really hungry and I can't remember. And those students were thankful that I was brave enough to ask that question, right? Another class that I went to literally right before I went into Miss Hodges' classroom was Mr. Gibbons. Mr. Gibbons was not a science person. Well, he got stuck with a science person, so it worked out really well. And he told me, you know the content more than I do. You're more comfortable and confident in the content. Will you be the lead teacher? And if you have done gen ed and you have done special ed, then you understand when you get a chance to be a lead teacher again, it's like, I can do what I went to college for, right? You're not having to pick up the pieces or hand out papers, or I play mental whack-a-mole. Not literally, obviously, but just, okay, I need to tell this one to sit down, I need this one to make sure that their pencil is out, and I need this one to make sure that they have the lid on the marker. It's mental whack-a-mole. I was able to go in. We had walkthroughs, because every district does walkthroughs at the most important times. And they didn't know who was the co-teacher and who was the registered teacher in that classroom. And we got applause from it. But it was reading the room, okay? So that brings me to sharing with a friend, what's your ideal way to co-teach? And what has been your default method of co-teaching? So if we go back to these 6 models, is there a default method that you have used? And is it effective? What's your go-to? Yes.
Okay, so we're kind of the odd person out of the group. We are with the Department of Correction.
Okay.
So it's not so much grade level. We're just trying to get to, high set completion.
Absolutely.
And so Ms. Sills and I have worked together for about 10 years, and like I said, I'm not sure that we neatly fit into any of those, but what works best for us is similar to what you explained, but sometimes that's not just staying on task with content, but behavior or all those things that we learned about proximity and just kind of keeping the room valid. That is one huge bonus, because then I don't have to stop for everybody to address these two or however. And then secondly, in the room we are now is a computer lab to prepare for high set, but she's the math teacher, I'm the language arts. So it's very clear. I got a question, is it math? That's hers. Or, no, I don't know what parallel structure means. And she's like, check with Miss Lisa,
Absolutely.
because, so again, I don't know that it fits neatly into any of these boxes specifically, but possibly touches on all of those, because also we have morning paperwork that has to be done as far as disciplinary actions, attendance, those kinds of things. So if there's something, to get them engaged early on while one is doing all the paperwork, then one can begin engaging. So we have gotten so accustomed to that, to me, it's almost like law enforcement. I don't think any one person should ever go out on their own. I don't think any teacher should really ever be on their own, because it truly
The state's
takes...
already left, haven't they?
Right, it takes two, the eyes in the back of the head. You need them all the way around and arms like an octopus, kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So we're just kind of enmeshed into all of that, because our structure is a little bit different. But like I said, I can't imagine a situation now not having access to a co-teacher or someone to help kind of carry the load with whatever situation comes up.
Absolutely, and I appreciate you saying that, because I think that the reason I kind of joked and asked if the state was still here is because I think all of us can agree, if we had someone in that room with us to handle the little things of, this one needs a break, this one is, I can see, I can read the room, I know this kid, and they are fixing to have a breakdown if I don't get them out of this situation. And you can only give so many purple folders to run errands to another teacher's room, right? Because that purple folder is great for you, but what is it doing to your friend or your coworker that's having to stop their instruction to answer the door to accept a purple folder, right? So thank you for sharing that. I think that you've hit on some great points, that having that extra person in the room is great, and it sounds like you guys have a great working relationship, so you know how to utilize each other's strengths. Anybody else have a default method that they go to? Yes.
I think as a kindergarten teacher, I do like one teach, one assist, mostly.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that is really where a lot of us feel comfortable. When I taught high school, when it comes to claiming students for test scores, because test scores are that's our teacher report card, whether we like it or not. But it also is a way for us to brag on ourselves that we had that growth. And so when I was teaching high school as a certified teacher, I had to claim 50% of those students. That's what my co-teacher and I agreed to do. I would claim 50% and he would claim 50%. Does that mean I claim just the special education students? Absolutely not. So you have a kid, maybe they have math goals and maybe they're in that inclusion classroom because they need help with read alouds, right? So you're in there for read alouds, but they get it. But you have a kid that hasn't slept and you have a kid that hasn't eaten, and they're in that general population, that normal student population that gets overseen. It's also your job to assist them, right? So again, it's not easy to put yourself in a box. And I don't think that we're servicing our students if we're trying to put our co-teaching label in a box or put a label on it at all. So thank you guys for sharing those out, for sure. So my co-teaching takeaways, read the room. You have to be able to know what that teacher needs, but most importantly, you need to know what those students need. Okay, I think it's really important. Maybe that teacher is your Mrs. Hodges, your teacher of the year, and they know what they're doing. So sometimes my job was to we used Parent Square for communications. It was great. If you are on any council for looking at any application or program for messaging students, I adored Parent Square. My job sometimes was just to send home an email of, hey, this student's doing amazing today. This student, you saw that light bulb go off, and I'm so proud of them, and I just wanted you to know so that you could be proud of them. Sometimes that was my job. I would walk around the room and just do that. Understand who was responsible for what. Wouldn't it be amazing if we had the time every single day to say, hey, we're going to do a quick 5-minute powwow before the bell rings this morning. I know you have copies to make and emails to send, and I know that the principal needs to see you in their office, but I need you for 5 minutes to discuss who's doing what. If you are the person who's floating from classroom to classroom, you may work with 8 or 9 teachers, and that's really impossible to do, okay? So having that understanding just from knowing who that teacher is, who's claiming those students, or just knowing them in general, and know your students. You have to know what your students need. Maybe you have a student who has been right above that RTI line, okay? Maybe they really could benefit from RTI, but man, they scored 1% too many, okay? But you need to know who you're helping and how you can help them. And then utilizing each other's strengths for sure. Again, Mr. Givens knew that I was confident and comfortable teaching science, so that's what he was happy with. Miss Hodges, she knew what she was doing, and I was afraid I was going to mess it up. So I let her do what she needed to do. And when I did my undergrad, one of my professors told me that teachers need to know 2 A's, adapt and adjust. Because maybe you have a student who's been great all year, and maybe last night they found out their parents are getting divorced, and they are just haywire, right? So you need to be able to adapt and adjust what you do. Lesson plans are great, but we all know lesson plans have to also adapt and adjust in order to meet those needs. So task number 3, think about what collaboration looks like for you. Not necessarily collaborative conferencing, but collaboration. When you're meeting with your teachers, what does that look like? I said to write down one thing you want to improve on. Feel free to think about it. Who wants to share one thing they want to improve about their collaboration, either with their teachers, with their departments? Something that you would like to improve.
One of the things I do is I have an Algebra 1 teacher that I work with who's phenomenal. He breaks things down. But sometimes me, who's not a math person, but has learned to do it, can offer suggestions on how to make it. And he's like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. But we collaborate like that. But we also look at the data on like the quizzes that we do every week and see who's struggling and who I need to pull. And it's not always the SPED kids. I pull kids that are, that are struggling. And it's worked really well because the kids have seen some growth, and for them it's great. It's like, hey, I did corrections and I did a good job. And so we collaborate that way, and he sends me the quizzes and tests for the ones that ahead of time so that I know the weekly plans because I get an email, so I know all those things coming up and I can do the adaptations when I have time so that they're ready for the weekly quizzes or when the tests are occurring.
Absolutely. That sounds like a great relationship you have with that teacher. Now, I have to ask, are you the only person who co-teaches with that teacher?
Yes, for the last 2 years, because he was the only Algebra 1 inclusion, and it's great. And I also do inclusion in another math class, and he teaches from the computer. And that's much harder to see what they like because all the work's on the computer. Math on the computer is not easy, so I feel at a loss in that class because they're on the computer and they're just punching buttons and okay, before I read the question. So that's not. We do a lot of paper and pencil, and we found the success of the students is much better because this is high school and they have to write. And if they're on a computer, it's too distracting to go to other sites.
Absolutely. 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 So how do you think you can improve your collaboration with the teacher that teaches from the computer?
Well, that was my second year with him. So the next year he did have more paper and pencil. So that was, but I a lot of times don't know what's going on in that room but I do see there's more paper and pencil, but I can help them more on paper and pencil because I can read it and, figure out how to do stuff. But I can't do that on the computer very easily. So, but that was a listening, so that was a collaboration, and we made progress. So maybe this year if we do it, then he can have a lot more papers.
Thank you for sharing, for sure. Anyone else have something that they know they need to improve on collaborating? Either maybe it's with their special education teacher that does inclusion, maybe it's with that general education teacher that's the content expert. So there's all different ways that we can collaborate and make time work easier. In my district, we use a lot of Google Docs. And so it's really easy when we do common planning, we will all work on one Google Doc. Now, when I was teaching in high school, I was really lucky that I had the same planning as the math department. But if I was supporting another content area, I wasn't there for their planning. And I think that that's something that I want to applaud anyone who's in special education or outside provider services, that we have to slowly become content experts. But don't forget that that gives your students strength. Because when they know that you are learning at the same time as them, you're in that struggle together. And sometimes that makes students feel less overwhelmed and less scared about what they're doing. When I was in Algebra 2, y'all, I took calculus in college, and Algebra 2, it was new math. I understood what every parent says about new math. Like the ways that they were doing the things, I didn't get it. And so I was learning it with my students. And it was amazing because then some of my students who math was not their jam, I used to tell students, you can't math and math can't you, and that's okay. So, but when they understood it and could teach it to me, imagine the power that that gives students. So being vulnerable and letting your students know that you're not always that content expert can really give them the strength. So what is collaboration? Pop quiz time. What's collaboration mean? We hear it. It's one of those key words that we always hear, right? But what is collaboration? According to Google, we're going to do, if it is in bold, you're going to read it with me. So, according to Google, collaboration is the process of two or more people, organizations, or entities working together to complete a task, to achieve a shared goal. It involves pooling different skill sets, sharing resources, and exchanging knowledge to create an outcome that is greater than what could be achieved individually. How powerful is that? Did it say you're depending on the content expert? Absolutely not. It means that two people or more are exchanging knowledge and using their strengths. I think that that's really powerful. I think everyone in here has worked with someone in some type of inclusion classroom, assuming everyone has worked in an inclusion classroom, where you learned something from your co-teacher. And imagine if you did not have the opportunity to learn that, would you have been as effective going forward? So I think it's really powerful to remember that we are all learning together. We all have strengths. Has anyone in here had the opportunity to do the McRail Balanced Leadership training? So this is a training that CMCSS provides for their administrators. I received my master's degree in educational leadership from Austin Peay, and this was our go-to textbook from ASCD. I see a couple of nods. McRail Balanced Leadership is amazing at teaching you what leadership is, at really helping you to be able to understand how to be a better leader for your students, for your teachers, for your community members. And I always heard the cliche phrase that you are a teacher leader. That's great. I'm not making principal pay. I don't know about you. Like, I'm doing the work, but I'm not making that extra 20 grand that they make at minimum, right? So it feels very overwhelming to think like, yes, I'm a teacher leader, but how am I supposed to make a difference? How many of you guys have felt that way? Okay, so Balanced Leadership, McRail International, they have some amazing framework, and this is one of the things that they have. I really like this graphic because the desired student outcome, you cannot have that without effective classroom practices, effective school practices, and student supports. Okay, our job as special education, as outside providers, is to support our students. And if we are not supporting our students, it's just like any other triangle and it's going to topple. Okay? If your school is not there to have those systems in place that they need, you can't get those desired outcomes. But most importantly, your classroom practices make a difference. I don't mean classroom management, okay? Everyone struggles with classroom management, especially when students' company manners wear off, like around September 1st. But all of these things are really important when it comes to getting that student outcome that we all need. So I wish that I could memorize this, but I don't trust myself. So Balanced Leadership has 3 things that they say are really, really important in order to have an effective classroom. So first is establishing a clear focus. For students, that's like your clear target, okay? But if you're like me, that clear target, it may stay up there for a week or two. Sometimes the clear target is we will stay on task. But the clear focus is when leaders focus on the right classroom and school practices, they can have a powerful impact. So focusing on not just classroom and school practices, but the right ones, okay? Managing change. So even when we focus on the right practices, it's imperative that we set the stage for change and understand the implications of change. So if you have a new inclusion teacher, if you have ever had an inclusion teacher and then they're out that day and you have a sub, our students on the spectrum don't like substitutes. Teachers on the spectrum don't like substitutes, okay? It's really important that you know how to manage that change for your students. If your teacher is going to be absent, how many of you get a text that says that teacher is going to be absent from that teacher? Is it important to communicate those things though? Especially for those moments that you know you're going to be out. Hey, I have an IEP meeting that's running over. I'm not going to be able to make it into class today. I just wanted to give you a heads up. You're managing the change so that your students can be successful. And then what I think is the most important piece, creating a purposeful community. Virtually everything in a school occurs within the context of a community. This community is composed of students, parents, teachers, and other school staff members, central office staff, the school board, other social agencies, and businesses. So your community goes way beyond your students and you. Your community involves everyone that student teaches and touches. Is your classroom a community? Who's a member of the community? And is it purposeful? I really liked The Sopranos. It was just my jam when it was on. And I used to joke with my students, high school students, we're talking juniors and seniors, baby adults, as I liked to call them, that my classroom was the mafia. And we handled things in our classroom unless we had to go to the Godfather. And we don't like to go to the Godfather if we can handle things in our classroom. If you're tired and need a break, you're not gonna act up in my classroom. You're gonna say, I need a minute, can I just go sit somewhere else? Absolutely, thank you for taking that accountability, thank you for advocating for yourself, and thank you for communicating. So is it a community where students feel welcome? Is it your classroom? Or is it our classroom? Because that's what can help students feel like they're comfortable. That's what can help visitors in your classroom, other teachers who are assisting you, feel comfortable. How many of you guys have had an SLP that has actually done their speech in your classroom in a corner? Because that's where the student feels comfortable. Absolutely. And when you know that student feels comfortable, that they want to stay in your room and do that service, and that speech pathologist is perfectly okay with it, to me that's really powerful, right? And then guess what? You're able to see how that student is interacting with someone else. Because maybe that student is terrified to read out loud for you. But you see them reading an entire passage with their speech pathologist. How powerful is that? Are you just gonna look at that and go, wow, they're really lucky? Or are you gonna go to that outside provider and say, hey, what did you do? What magic words are you using? Can I borrow your magic wand? Are you bribing them? Do they like jelly beans or M&Ms? Like, what's their favorite? How are you getting them to do that? But that's what a purposeful community really is. So defining a purposeful community is academic optimism. Do you want your students to be at sea level, or do you want them to be their best? There's some students that we want to survive them, right? And there's some students that want to survive us. And that can be academic optimism sometimes, as horrible as that may sound. When you can build that relationship that they're showing up every single day in your class. Maybe it's a student, I had a student who in first period, they had attended less than 10% of the school year for that first period every year. And I had him junior year. And I said, hey, I really need you to come to class. And he said, I really need to sleep. I said, me too, dude, I feel you. Student was on the spectrum. He also had ADHD. He had executive functioning issues, okay? So knowing that student and knowing that he could succeed if we actually got him to school on time, in his IEP, next time we wrote it, he had a goal for executive functioning, that he would arrive to class on time every day with his supplies. And guess what? When he wasn't, we had the evidence from attendance to then ask for special transportation because this student was a walker and mom had to be at work way before this student was supposed to be at school. So now, because he had that executive functioning goal, I read the room, I knew my student, I was able to say, hey, this kid needs a special education bus to come pick him up because he's not going to be able to come to school. And guess what, y'all? He passed my class because he came to school every day, okay? His academic optimism, I couldn't look at his academic pieces until I started working on his self-accountability reasons, okay? So keep in mind, academic optimism does not mean all A's. It means every student doing their best. Sometimes every day their best is different. A moral purpose. Moral purpose is knowing in your heart and soul that you are doing your best, that everyone who is a part of your community is doing their best. I had students and our friends in the back from the Department of Corrections. I think that maybe you will understand me a little bit more than some teachers. How many of you guys have that student and it's really hard when they come in and they have no boundaries with an adult? They think that sitting in a seat means that you don't like them and so they're going to rebel. And a lot of times, professionals in the education realm say their parents should have raised them better. And I hope no one in here repeats those words ever, because every parent sends us their best. Every parent sends us their best. Is it our definition of the best? Maybe not. But until you have that community where you're working with the parents, do you understand the stress that the parents are under? It is collaborating outside of your classroom. Collaboration is working with your teachers. It is working with your peers, but it's also extending that community. Intentional use of assets. So if you have that paraprofessional in your classroom or another certified special education teacher coming in for inclusion, are you using their assets with intention? Maybe you really just need them to take student number 1 on a walk around the block for a second. And by the block, I mean inside the school walls, I promise. But you just need them to go on a walk so that they can get those wiggles out. Maybe you really just need them to take an extra couple of students to do some extra time with. Maybe they really just need you to grade a paper at that time because they are so behind and it's got to go home, and you give better effective feedback than they do. And then finally, community engagement. So I think it's really important to involve the community outside of your walls, because maybe you have a math teacher that you have bonded with and you work well with because you've known them for 2 years, and now you're working with a teacher that's teaching from that computer. Okay, so you need to involve that community of teachers in a positive and uplifting way of, hey, how can I take some of the things that we do in your classroom together to make them transfer over into this classroom, because it's really working better for students. Task number 4, thinking spot number 4, can you have effective collaboration without a purposeful community? So I'm going to call on you because I saw you shaking your head. Why do you say no? Why do you say you cannot have effective collaboration without a purposeful community? In our white sweater over here.
If you and your co-teacher are not talking and working together, then how do you know the needs of the students in front of you?
Absolutely. Now I want to ponder you with a follow-up question. If you are the co-teacher who goes to 8 or 9 different classrooms, hypothetically, are you in touch with that student's parents?
It depends. Because like being a SPED, I was inclusion and now I do a contained classroom, but when I was in SPED inclusion, a lot of those parents I did deal with on a regular basis. But if the parent I didn't deal with, if I was working with a child, I could talk with the teacher, and then they would talk with the parents because the parent did not know me, but they knew the classroom teacher.
Absolutely. So are we extending our community at that point in order to have those desired student outcomes? Okay. Anyone else? What do you think? Can you have an effective collaboration without that purposeful community? Any risk takers say yes? You can go against me, it's fine, I promise. Again, I'm not the expert. I was invited to speak, but I'm not claiming to be an expert by any means. when you get into common planning with your administrators, how many of you all do co-teaching, inclusion classrooms? I call it classroom hopping. And you have to do common planning, but it's not with the teachers that you co-plan with. So what does that look like for you then?
It's a mess.
Okay, so how can you have effective collaboration when you don't have the time that's dedicated to plan with those teachers?
You find time when you're in the classroom. You find 5 minutes when they're working on independent work, or you pop in, when sometimes it's in the hallway and in passing period, you find those 2 minutes, you're like, hey, I have a question about this. Or you try to do stuff over email, which isn't necessarily as effective as sitting down and talking it out, but you really have to work hard to carve out that time. Like this year I'm split between 7th and 8th, but I plan with 7th, and I've never co-taught 8th before. So I'm gonna have to figure out how to fit that into my schedule, because I've got to be just as prepared for my 8th graders as I am for my 7th graders.
Absolutely, absolutely. I appreciate you sharing that. Again, from my high school background, y'all, I got to go teach in a kindergarten classroom. My background is high school. And it was precious. My job, literally for the first 2 days I went in and I was like, oh my God, they're so little. They're so cute. And then their company manners wore off and I realized, oh, they're feisty. And it was great. But here I am technically the special education teacher. My caseload was 4th and 5th grade, and I'm working with kindergartners. I hadn't had a kindergartner in 6 years when my son was in kindergarten, and I was expected to assist with these students. And so that, it was difficult because kindergarten content standards are very, very different. Back in my day, those were things that you were expected to know when you came into kindergarten, and now they're having to learn those things. And so again, finding that time, because I planned with the 5th grade team, because that's where my caseload primarily was. And so finding the time to sit down with kindergarten and be like, well, what's the letter of the week? Because it was important. And like, hey, how are these students pronouncing this letter, right? Are they able to write the letter? Because that's not gonna be in the lesson plans, and that may not be when I'm in there assisting. So finding that time to have that communication for sure. So this is an amazing, amazing graphic I had permission to share. And it talks about a collaborative instructional cycle. So do we have any academic coaches in here? So academic coaches, I'm not sure if it is a universal term or not, but those are the people in our district that go and help you to become a better teacher, okay? So they all do instructional rounds and instructional cycles to make sure that they're addressing the needs that you have, maybe that they observe, maybe that the administrator has said is kind of not your area of strength from team observations. But you have to co-plan together, co-teach, co-assess, and co-reflect. And sometimes that does not mean you're sitting down to do those at the same time, right? But again, to be effective, to be effective and reflective, you really have to make sure that you're doing these things. I will admit my weakness. The last school year when I left in March, I was not doing a good job at these with my co-teachers. And that was a really hard thing for me to face. When you can say, I love my job, but I'm not good enough for it right now. I need to get better. How do you get better if your collaboration team is not willing to say, hey, I really need you in this asset. I really need you to grow in this area so that you can help our students the way that they need to grow. So I really like this graphic because it really kind of includes a little bit of everything that we need to do. Again, co-planning can be difficult, but if you're able to get those lesson plans in advance. Our school was great. They were able to provide me a copy of all the textbooks. So even if I wasn't able to plan, I could at least read through the passages they were going to read through. We used Benchmark. Anyone else? 4th grade Benchmark, ELA? There is an entire unit. You said you do? No, I thought I saw a hand, just kidding. There's an entire unit on volcanoes in Mount Vesuvius, okay? And they are working with Piney, a first person account. See, my brain's not working because it's been summer. But my students didn't know what Vesuvius was. They didn't know how volcanoes worked. And so here they are trying to read this text that had a lot of those ancient Greek and ancient Roman words in them that they're expected to read and understand and pronounce, and they didn't know what a volcano was, right? So in my intervention time, I was able to kind of do a quick lesson on what a volcano was, what Mount Vesuvius was, what Pompeii was, to really give them that background information. But it's because I was able to not necessarily co-plan with that team, but I was able to sit down and at least preview that text. So collaboration in real life, the state of Tennessee says we have a minimum of 150 minutes for individual duty-free planning time per week in Tennessee. So I know, I can see the laughs. Yeah, it's so much time. It's 2 hours and 30 minutes. We can solve all the world's problems in that time, but we're expected to. And so we have to figure out how we can use that time, right? At our district, we had 1 day a week that we had common planning where we were expected to meet with our common, with our team members in order to plan for the next unit. So when you're talking about that, and then they're also expected to do everything that they need to do, how are you going through and making sure that you are carving out time to work with that co-teacher? And then what changes can be made to make it easier to collaborate effectively? Email, catching them in the hall, using a Google Doc so that you can collaborate on. It's really important that you have to be intentional about that time. So, I appreciate your time, guys. What else can we solve for you today? What questions do you have about co-teaching, collaboration, things that I've done, things that others have done that have made it more effective and made it easier for them? All right, I definitely appreciate you guys inviting me. Thank you, Dr. Clark and the MTSU Center for Educational Media for inviting me out to speak with you all. I really appreciate it. I know we only have 2 or 3 weeks left of summer, but I again say thank you for taking time out of your day in order to grow as a professional so that your students can have even higher desired student outcomes.
So Jenna Winstead,
Yes.
Here's a token of our
Thank you.
appreciation for
Appreciate
you being
that.
here today.
Thank you so much.
There's so many practical suggestions here, and I love that chart you had too.
Yeah,
That was good.
Absolutely.
Any comments or questions for her on this? We're going to continue the discussion of collaboration in the next session because that's kind of the theme of this afternoon. But you know, as we did last time, does anyone have anything you want to share before Jenna sits down on what has worked? What has worked?
I just want to say that I've worked on teams where the collaboration has been struggle bus. And I've been really, really lucky with the current team that I'm with. They make me want to come to work because, you know, it's hard. So I just think, I don't know, maybe this is like a small thought, but like, in my experience, collaboration can go really good or it can go really bad. So I don't know if there's like a middle ground in my experience, but it's either been really bad or really good. So, yeah.
I appreciate you taking the risk to state that as well, because I think we can all agree that if you have worked on a team, that maybe you've had the same team members for years, you know what to do, right? You are able to utilize each other's strengths. Clarksville, we are right next to the 3rd largest Army base in the United States. We have a lot of turnover because of Army PCSing. I can't tell you what PCS stands for, but it's when they move. I know that much. So we have a lot of turnover. So our grade level teams don't stay together very long. I think we have 25 or 26 elementary schools in our district, 8 middle schools, 8 high schools, plus middle college at Austin Peay campus. And so there's a lot of transition and movement. This was my 10th year of teaching, and I completely agree. You have those teachers that can be your walnut and your marigold field, unfortunately, if you guys have heard that story. And it's really important. I spoke at Austin Peay, not to speak about a competing university, but I spoke to their students who were graduating, and I let them know that if you feel like you don't like teaching, don't leave the profession just yet. Maybe you're not on the team that is meant to help you grow. And I think that's really important. I know in a lot of smaller districts, you may only have 1 or 2 elementary schools, but sometimes it's really important to, if you realize that you're just not jamming with your team, maybe you can talk to your admin about changing grade levels. You don't have to quit the profession if you're getting frustrated, because just like you, I've been really blessed to have some people who have challenged me in the most positive and uplifting ways, and definitely helped me become a better teacher, a better person. And then I've had some where I had to carry the weight, and that made it very stressful and very difficult for me when I was in a stressful position like education. So I appreciate you sharing that for sure.
And you know, first let me say, we are not competing institutions if we're all training teachers, you know, so we're good. We're
Absolutely.
good with that. But we've had some ideas presented, particularly in the third session today, and then in this session today, that give us some pieces to use in evaluating these paraeducator, gen ed teacher relationships or co-teaching, collaborative teaching relationships. When it's not working well, we've actually got some frameworks that we've been given today, or some factors to consider. Is this what's not working? Is this what's not working? Because to me, it's helpful when something's not working to say, what's a checklist I can look at to see which one is not working? And so that's been helpful with this session, and of course with the morning session talking about paraeducators today. So, you know, talking about it can either be good or bad or anything in between. Evolving and improving, hopefully, is the space in between there. So we've got a comment or a question right here.
Just one factor to consider. Of course, the older I get, the younger everybody else looks. So I think some of the most difficult situations for collaboration has to do with newer, younger, less experienced teachers versus those of us who are a little more seasoned. And I'm not placing blame or fault on singularly any one side, but those have been some of my personal challenges, because even in efforts to truly help, it's not always received well, or they feel as if that's a challenge or a critique, a negative, feedback kind of thing. And other than, like I said, just getting to know each other to truly, as a person and as a teacher, I'm still always searching for ways to kind of bridge that gap. And like I said, sometimes, especially age, sometimes just the terminologies we use and the things like that. Maybe I'm viewed as too old and I'm viewing them as too young, or, whatever it is. But logically, I know that we're both needed. I know that I have some wisdom and experience that probably could be updated with some fresh ideas, but sometimes that seems to be the most challenging, even more so than overcoming personality types. We can still find common goals within content areas or approaches, but sometimes it's this age/experience issue that gets in the way of truly being collaborative rather than competitive or critical.
Absolutely.
Does
Absolutely, and I agree with that. I was the lucky and unlucky one that I finished my bachelor's degree at 32 and had some non-education work experience. I think that I like to think that I speak for every graduate who's going into education, that we are excited, passionate, and ready to change the world. We have to look at the people who have been teaching longer, that may be burnt out. They may have done that and it didn't work for them. And we have to value that, again, using those shared experiences and using everyone's strengths in order to really help the team grow.
And I truly believe that through communication with administration and other things, we have gen ed teachers, and they could be wonderful teachers, but they do not need to be inclusion teachers.
Absolutely agree.
And we've actually had conversations where we avoid putting children with any kind of IEP in their room. And it doesn't mean they're not an amazing teacher for some kids, but they don't understand the dynamics of a child of different children, like one that'll sit in class but not do work, but he'll do it later in the classroom with me because they're still doing it. But they're listening and they can answer oral questions. They're just not going to write because they don't feel comfortable. And sometimes it requires different strategies that I can use in a different time. But there's some teachers, and we need to recognize they don't need to be doing inclusion, because special ed students are a unique bunch of kids, and you have to know how to understand them and have a compassion for them.
I completely agree. When I was an inclusion teacher, I had a class that this student did not need support in physical science. But we knew, I call him a quirky bird, because he was a quirky little bird, and he was amazing. And I remember looking at midterms. He was failing my class, and he made a 100 on his Algebra 1 midterm exam with no curve. And I went to him and I was like, a student, you have a 12 in my class for the semester. And that takes work, because I do a lot of extra credit. And you have a 12, but you made a 100 on your Algebra 1 midterm. How? And he looked at me and went, it takes a lot less work to fill in a bubble than it does to do your worksheets. And at that point, it hit me. He knew how to do it. So when we got into calculating density and things, I would say, hey, can you do 2 problems for me? You're the teacher, don't you know how to do it? Absolutely, I do. But if you want to pass my class and get your Yu-Gi-Oh cards back, you need to do it. And he was able to verbally explain it to me with, calculating to the 1,000th in his head. Unfortunately, I didn't document that he was able to complete the work verbally. And so that was another conversation for another day. But it takes someone, again, knowing the students, building that relationship, reading the room, and knowing your co-teacher to help them understand what that student needs, and you get to be that student's voice for them. And again, I think that you did hit on a point. Not everyone needs to be doing inclusion. Not everyone needs to be doing general education. I think finding your niche is when you really are comfortable, confident, and you're making the most effective difference in those students' lives.
And I think that some teachers have a difficult time understanding that just because our kids learn differently does not mean they don't know stuff.
Absolutely.
They're actually, some of them are scary smart, because I look at them and I'm like, oh, didn't think of that. That's
Absolutely.
That's high level thinking, but it's just not on paper and pencil.
Absolutely. I appreciate your comment.
You know, another dynamic in this collaborative teaching, co-teaching, and then back to para-educators is, if you do not have the authority to direct someone because they're a colleague, then that complicates it a little bit in terms of, resolving the situation or improving or growing the situation. But back to the difference in ages, sometimes informally, you have a position of advantage having the age. The only exception to that is in technology as a rule. That's the only exception. But in terms of the other. But if you are in a position of supervisory authority, then you can handle it one way. If you're not in a position of supervisory authority and it's a colleague, then you will need to use your adult learning principles in working with people, or you will need to have a conversation not anonymously with your administrator, but share the materials from these kinds of sessions so that administrators need to know how to look at collaborative relationships and evaluate them and understand how can we make improvements here. Because that supervisory question complicates it sometimes, because you can't tell a peer what to do. But if you have a good working relationship, you can influence a peer in what they do.
So I kind of want to go off what you're saying. Sometimes when there are disagreements about what we should do when we're working with others, we need to remember about the shared goal that we want these students to grow, and also that IDEA requires us to also provide research-based strategies as much as possible. So if there are disagreements, it's important that we go back and we consult the literature base about what works. There's the What Works Clearinghouse you can use that can help educate some of our colleagues that might not know what current best practices are for a given situation. And that really takes the load off of you trying to persuade somebody, trying to make sort of some of those judgment calls about an educator and a colleague that we just shouldn't be making. The focus should really be on the kid and giving the student the best education that we can, utilizing the research-based strategies. And also, there are some materials on University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, their website. It's called TIES, TIES. There is a whole framework for how you can collaborate. And sometimes if you have a framework or a template to go from, it can help diffuse some of those disagreements before they even begin. So there are tons of materials on the TIES website. I use that with my students all the time and refer to that. So definitely check those out. There are videos that model how you all should collaborate as well. So hopefully that helps.
And you also have the resource of the Center for Educational Media video library, and you can have your people view this video from today and hear this conversation. You see what I'm saying? Because again, I thought we've had some good conversation today from your comments, your success stories, your questions, and then even this conversation we're having right now.
Absolutely. I think that a lot of our problems as individuals, as professionals, as citizens of our wonderful world, can really be resolved through effective communication. And I do agree that sometimes those difficult conversations have to happen between a paraeducator and a certified educator, and finding someone who is an unbiased third party to help mediate those conversations can be absolutely amazing, whether that is a consulting teacher from central office, whether that is an administrator, a guidance counselor, school counselor, anyone who has had that unbiased, that they want students to be successful and they just want to help to navigate the conversation so that everyone can improve, can be absolutely amazing.